Hello, bikers and bike enthusiasts. I hope you're doing wonderful today. My name is Arvin, and this is Bearded Outlaw. This is my Yamaha R3, and I've had it for a little over a month now. I've put in about 600 miles, and it's time for its first maintenance. I ordered the oil filter on Amazon forever ago, and it finally got in today. So now I am gonna go buy the oil, and let's do an oil change. Let's go. Now that we're back from the auto store, it's time to change the oil. The motor oil in a vehicle keeps the engine nice and lubricated so all the moving parts are free to move with minimal friction. It also acts as a cleaner as it picks up dust and dirt that makes its way into the engine. As the motor oil gets used, it becomes darker over time as it collects all the dust and debris. At this point, it makes the engine perform less efficiently and might even give you lower fuel economy. With that said, these are the things you are going to need to perform an oil change on this Yamaha R3. The owner's manual says that this bike needs 2.22 quarts or 2.1 liter of engine oil with the oil filter. I'm going to be using motorcycle grade 10W40 fully synthetic oil. The 10 and the 40 refer to the viscosity or the thickness of the oil in cold and hot temperatures. The oil you use might be different based on where you live due to the range in temperatures. So again, take a look at your owner's manual before purchasing your oil. Another thing, make sure you get motorcycle oil as it is a little different than the ones used in a car. With the oil, you're also going to need an oil filter. On a motorcycle, I like to go with OEM filters. So take a look at the part number on the oil filter and get the very same one. You're also going to need an oil drain pan, a funnel, and an oil filter tool in case it's on too tight and you're unable to loosen it by hand. Aside from the oil filter tool, you're also going to need a metric 12mm socket and a wrench. With that said, let's get started. Before you begin, let's get familiar with all the parts that we're going to be messing around with. The first is the oil fill port. This is where the new oil is going to go in. The next is the oil drain plug, where the old oil is going to come out, and finally the oil filter. And that's it. Doing an oil change is quite simple, and if you have all the tools necessary, it shouldn't take long. Before we do anything, we want the oil to be warm so it flows out nice and smooth. To do this, start up the bike and let it run for a couple of minutes. If you just came back from a ride, let the engine cool down for a good 20 to 30 minutes before performing the oil change. You want the oil to be warm, not scalding and giving you third-degree burns. The first thing we're going to do is to place the oil drain pan under the bike. Then, with a 12mm socket, we're going to turn left and loosen up the bolt. It might be on real tight, so don't be afraid to use a little muscle. Once that is loosened, you can use your hand and take it off entirely. It is best to use gloves so you don't get the oil on your hand and make a mess everywhere. Once that is done, open up the oil fill port to allow the oil to drain faster. Let the oil drain entirely. Don't be in a rush and leave some of the old oil in your bike. Let it drain until it stops dripping. When we get to this point, we need to then take off the oil filter. Just like a regular screw, we want to turn it to the left to loosen it. If it is put on by a competent person, you should be able to take it off with just your hand. Unfortunately, this was on way too tight, and so I needed to use this oil filter removal tool attached to a wrench to take this off. When the oil filter is off, it is time to get the new oil filter. Even though the new oil filter comes pre-lubricated, it's a good habit to put a little bit of oil on the gasket. Some people dip their finger in oil and run it along the gasket, but what I like to do is to put the new oil filter up to the old one and twist like so. This is something I learned from my auto teacher in high school, and this habit stuck. With the new oil filter lubricated, let's put it back in and turn it to the right to tighten it. Remember, the oil filter doesn't need to be on so tight. Just hand tighten it, then twist it a quarter to the right. That is it. Do not use a tool. Do not use oil filters that come with a wrench attachment. Doing so just makes it that much more difficult to take it off, and it also increases the chance of you stripping the thread. Once we have the oil filter in, let's put the drain plug back in, turning it to the right and tightening it with the wrench. When you're done, use a rag and clean the area so we'll be able to tell if there's a leak later. Now it's time to fill up the bike with oil. When you're filling up the bike, it's best to have it level. If you have a center stand or a rear stand, use it. The oil level window shows the correct oil level of the bike when the bike is level. If you don't have a stand, that's okay too. Just make sure you hold it or have someone else hold the bike level for you as you finish pouring in the oil. This bike requires 2.22 quarts or 2.1 liters of motor oil. Right now, I've put in two 1-quart bottles so far, and when I level the bike, the oil level window shows that we have the right amount of oil. But don't let that fool you, we still have some ways to go. I'm going to start the bike and let the oil cycle through the system and fill up the oil filter. As this happens, you'll notice the oil level go down in the window. So keep your bike level and keep filling it until the oil reaches the center of the window. Once the oil is at the right level, we can close up the oil fill port and we are done. On this Yamaha R3, there is an oil light on the MFD that keeps blinking when it's time for you to change the oil. So after completing the oil change, we need to reset the oil meter to 0. To do this, press the left button until you see the word oil. Then hold down the right button until it starts flashing. Then hold the right button down again for another 5 seconds until it stops flashing and the odometer reads 0. And with that, boys and girls, we have finished an oil change on this Yamaha R3. Remember, the steps to perform an oil change is the same whether it be a car or a different motorcycle. Just follow these steps and you'll be doing your own oil change in no time. Doing your own oil change is quite simple and it ensures the quality of the oil change. Also, with the oil change at the dealership costing around $80, you'll be able to save yourself some of your hard-earned cash. With that, everyone, I'm going to end this video right here. If you have any questions, you can leave them